Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Masters in Business with Barry Ritholtz on Bloomberg Radio.
This week on the podcast, wow, this is really so exciting to share with you. We hosted a conference out in Huntington Beach, California, my firm, Ritholtz Wealth Management, along with Advisor Circle, called Future Proof. It's a giant event on the beach in Huntington Beach, California. Part of the event is a series of panels and interviews and fireside chats. I got to sit down with Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale. He's really a fascinating guy. He's been a serial entrepreneur, managing money for Peter Thiel, interning initially at, of all places, PayPal, which he then just one successful company after another. Just a fascinating guy. So we spoke for about 35 minutes. I thought the conversation was fascinating. We talked not only about Palantir and the defense industry and how the world of warfare is changing. Lonsdale is a serial entrepreneur who has had success after success after success and is still a relatively young guy, and there's more fascinating things to come from him. Here it is, my discussion with Palantir's Joe Lonsdale in Huntington Beach at Future Proof 2024. So I just highlighted a handful of things about your career, but I really want to delve into the specifics. You're at Stanford studying computer science, and somehow you land a job as an intern at PayPal. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this was a pretty cool place. So Elon Musk, with his smartest friends, started a company back then in the 90s called X. And Peter Thiel and his smartest friends started Confinity. And they were two of 8 competitors, and they decided rather than destroy each other to merge. It was actually interesting times. Like, the people were working so hard that some of the people working for Peter at one point had not gotten enough sleep and were suggesting ways to bomb the office of the other guys. They realized this is really bad. We should probably stop this. And so the companies merged to form PayPal, and a lot of the most talented people from Stanford Computer Science went there at that time. It was an amazing place. Elon kept trying to rename PayPal back to X.com, which they didn't let him do. So I guess he eventually got his way 20 years later with Twitter. But no, it was a really fun place to learn. And a lot of my friends there, these guys were like 10 or 15 years older than me. A lot of people who were working there ended up going on to start YouTube and Yelp and LinkedIn and all sorts of great companies. So it's a fun place to learn.
Right. That was quite a brain trust over there.
Yeah.
Your next role is at Peter Thiel's hedge fund, Clarium Capital. You describe that as one of the top intellectual think tanks in the world. Tell us a little bit about your experience working with Thiel at Clarium Capital.
Yeah, sure. That was a global macro hedge fund. And so that's a really fun part of finance where you just get to try to figure out at a high level what's going on in the world, and lots of arguments about politics and economics and history and financial markets. And you try to, on one hand, it's quantitative. You're modeling different things like the Australian currency versus the price of commodities versus what's going on in China. And on the other hand, you're kind of just discussing what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. And we had a really good 10-year run. But while I was there, I tried to hire a bunch of my smartest friends to help us, and they thought finance was boring. And we started a project based on how PayPal was going after all the bad guys, because the Chinese and Russian mafia had been stealing our money at PayPal, and we ended up building these investigative tools and creating Palantir out of there. So that's what I ended up doing instead.
So I just want to put a little flesh on the bones. You said you had a pretty good run. You ended up with a very nice 10-year track record, but first 2 years out of the gate, something like plus 30% and plus 50%. Am I getting those numbers about right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to know, this is macro finance, right? So it's a fun area. Like, an example of one of the best trades we figured out that worked for a few years is Greenspan had cut interest rates, and there was more money than ever before going into the GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And so you had this massive amount of money there. And because these guys were so big, when they would hedge their mortgage portfolios, it would move all the global fixed income. And so what happened was, you remember, like late 2002, you had like 5-6% interest rates, and rates started to fall, and so people started refinancing their homes. And when people start refinancing their homes, the duration of mortgages goes down. So in order to balance the durations, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had to buy huge amounts of 10-year notes But they had to buy so much that it actually made their interest rates go lower, which led to more refinancing, which led to them buying more. So it was this feedback effect. And you're able to measure the feedback effect. You got down to like 1 year duration, 3% 10-year notes back then. And then all of a sudden it was snapped back really quickly because all the money was staying in the economy. So anyway, you can kind of map this stuff out, figure out how to trade fixed income. It's a fun environment.
That must have been a fun environment. So you mentioned Palantir. I have to mention, how old were you when you were one of the co-founders of Palantir? You were a young guy.
I was 21. I'm 42 now, so it was a long time ago.
And since now we're going to talk about Palantir, congratulations. They're entering the S&P 500.
It's an awesome milestone.
At 21, did you ever imagine something like that happening?
Yeah, I was a pretty obnoxious kid. So, actually, at Palantir, it was great. We gave offers. So we were known for having the top engineering culture. Peter was an investor in Facebook at the time. So our competition was Palantir and Facebook for the best engineers. And you really had to convince these people this is going to be a big upside place. And so you'd give them offers, and you give them 3 options. They could have a higher salary but less equity, less stock, medium, or you have a lower salary but more stock. And I'd draw up on the option for the first 200 people. We'd put a table, and we'd say, here's how much your stock might be worth if this company's worth $500 million or $1 billion or $5 billion. And I got so much shit for including $5 billion as one of the possibilities. People were like, this is ridiculous, Joe.
And the market cap today?
It's about $82 billion now.
So it worked out for
it took a long time, but it worked out.
20 years for $80 billion. It's a well worth trade. So when the company launches, it's a big data analytics company. Today, the focus is defense, commercial, and government. Was this a natural evolution, or was there a pivot somewhere along the way?
No, we started the company to kill the bad guys.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. I don't know if we're supposed to say that.
Post 9/11.
I don't work there anymore, so I can say it now. Like, we started the company after 9/11 to kill the bad guys and stop attacks, and we ended up helping run the targeting systems in 40 allied countries and wiping out over 10,000 terrorists, including a lot of the most important ones. So, and it protects civil liberties too, but let's get the bad guys. Yeah. And it turns out the hard data problems you solve when you run that infrastructure could be used for a lot of other things. You're basically building ontologies of information and workflows and organizing all the data. The government, and when we started Palantir, the government at the time spent like $38 billion gathering data. So I don't even know what it spends now, but massive amounts of information in tens of thousands of databases. How the hell do you make all this stuff talk to each other? And so by solving those problems to kind of organize that, it turns out you now have the data in a form where AI can be used really easily. So today, Palantir has really caught the AI wave because it enables AI workflows no one else can.
And am I correct in saying during COVID, Palantir helped governments figure out how to monitor, how to track, how to roll out vaccines? What was Palantir's role during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's used by the armed forces to organize all of their logistics and supplies and everything. So it's a very similar problem. How do you use all the data coming in about how to prioritize things in a pandemic, because you're coordinating just massive numbers of things and production and all sorts of stuff. I mean, you have a lot of Fortune 500 companies using it to manage all of their and optimize all of their production and distribution. So obviously it works very well for that, for the pandemic. I think like 36 countries used it for that too. So it's good.
So it's a proven technology today. What was it like getting governments to recognize the value of this in the early 2000s? They were distracted.
It was almost as difficult as it was to get RIAs to take Addepar seriously the first 5 years. So no, it's actually very funny. You think after Palantir we were like, oh, this is going to be easy. No, listen, governments are very funny. They want to use things that are new and innovative, but they want to use things that everyone else is already using. So breaking in is a very chicken and egg problem that's very hard. It turns out that there's a lot of money in the special forces and special operations units who, frankly, their lives are a lot more on the line than almost anyone else, because they're constantly doing really dangerous missions around the world, and they're running a lot of the most important things that our armed forces do. And those groups have such bold and such competent people that we're able to break in, work with them, get them to prove that it worked, and then that kind of set the precedent for other parts of government to then work with us. So thank goodness for our special ops groups.
So it wasn't DARPA that first started with you, or did you have any work with them?
I think DARPA was helpful a little bit, but the thing that really matters is people using it on the ground where lives are on the line. You want, if you have something that's the best, it's going to break in because people need it, because something is existential where they're going to die if they don't have it. They're not going to be able to do the mission if they don't have it. So DARPA is more of an academic thing that's smart, but I'd much rather work with the people whose lives are on the line, and that's how you really break in with the best things.
You mentioned Addepar and AI. Just so you know, ChatGPT is what told me it was $5 trillion,
Well,
not $7.
ChatGPT is behind.
So you found the company in 2009. Today you're the chairman. It began life as a cloud-based software platform specializing in data aggregation, analytics, and reporting of portfolios. What was the original business model?
Well, I had my family office at first, right around then. It was a smaller family office, and then I had a lot of friends and people I talked to who ran family offices, who ran RIAs. There were new groups on the West Coast, like Iconic and others, building these firms around the tech world on RIA land, and everyone hated their software. And I looked at it, and it's like, this is a mess, and there's not a really good solution here. And we were mapping out, there's a lot of new possibilities thanks to the cloud, thanks to what you could do with data. So we said, let's build something that's better. And I naively thought we would have something that was significantly better within a year or two. It turned out it took us hundreds of millions of dollars in several years, but I am quite confident it's the best at this point.
So the genesis was, hey, I have to manage my own capital, and the tools aren't good. I'm going to create it, or was the original plan, I have an idea and everybody should be using it?
It was a business. I think in general, when you have like an area that you realize is broken for you and for people you know, rather than just build it for yourself, I think it's a good excuse to build a business around it. So I was actually CEO full-time for a few years, getting this off the ground. Eric Poirier, who's run it for over 10 years now, is a much better CEO than me, so I'm a proud chairman now. But no, we built it as a business. I mean, listen, you guys, when we first hooked, there's 7,000 custodians in the U.S., and so when we first hooked up data, the biggest custodians are people like Fidelity and Schwab and others, and we get this all set up. We spent a bunch of time on it the first year. We hook up the live data, we're getting going, and it's all wrong. And we're like, oh, what do we do wrong? And it turns out, even those custodians just have bad data. The space is a mess. It turns out there's lots of hard problems to solve to make this stuff all work right together. So and everyone wants to customize things differently. Every RIA has their own way of doing things, their own way of showing things. And so it turned out it took us several more years to get it right.
So $7 trillion, you have some very large RIAs on it. You have broker-dealers like Morgan Stanley on it. How big can Addepar scale?
Well, I think there's about $250 trillion globally that's addressable. Maybe only 150 to 200 of that would use a solution. So even though we're growing really quickly now, I think we're growing over 30% a year still. There's still probably at least another decade of fast growth. I mean, this is a giant market, and we're still learning. I think they're still learning every week from clients about how to serve them better. There's I think about 1,200 firms or so, give or take, on the platform now, and I'd love to see them triple that over the next few years.
So most of what Addepar focuses on are public markets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. But you also said, hey, this private market thingy is going to get big one day.
Well, being able to report on every possible thing someone owns is key for Addepar. But Addepar itself doesn't help people access the private markets.
So let's talk a little bit about Opto and that platform. The idea behind Opto, and you're chairman of Opto Investments, is to focus on private markets. Tell us what you see in that space.
Well, what I saw is that the way people tend to come to you, so obviously I run an investment firm, a lot of my friends run investment firms, I have a lot of strong opinions about private markets, right? And this is an area where in the 1990s, there was a lot more public companies, and there's a small number of private companies. Today, you have more private companies than public companies. And frankly, a lot of my smartest friends, people doing things that are changing how the world works, are mostly doing that within private companies. And so today, if you're not accessing private markets, you're going to get left way behind. Your returns, I think especially the next 10 years, given how AI is changing productivity in so many parts of our economy we could talk about, it's very clear you get left behind. And it's messed up that a lot of people don't have access to what's clearly the higher returning areas if they're done right. And what I saw is the way people were trying to sell people on private market stuff is basically purely a brokerage model where they come to your firm and they say, we're going to make money by selling you kind of mediocre crap. That's how a lot of these things operate, and I think that's actually, frankly, disgusting. It's just misaligned. It's not how any of us would do business normally. Is that you don't want to put money into the things that you're getting paid to put money into. You want to have an aligned model where we all make money together by accessing the best things. And private markets, especially venture capital, but frankly, certain parts of PE, certain parts of alt credit, all these other things, they have very high disparity. You really want to get in the top decile, top quartile stuff, and you're going to do great. And if you get into mediocre stuff, you're going to have mediocre results. And so just the whole space just seemed misaligned to me. And then on top of that, it's really stressful for a lot of people to get all their clients into these things because there's just lots more paperwork, lots of messes, lots of legal stuff. And like, why not make it as close as possible to doing something in the public markets, to do something in private markets? And really, technology and AI can solve that. So Opto, it's about making people aligned. It's having one platform where you do everything. And frankly, it's about using my network and my friends' networks to put what we think is the very best stuff on it that my family office is doing, and let's share that with others.
So at this event, we have over 2,000 RIAs. Of these, some of them are single practice, small operations. Some are really big firms with tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on them. How can large and small firms integrate Opto into their practice?
Yeah, there are both lots of small firms and some very large firms now on Opto. The goal is that it makes it as easy as possible. Similar to Addepar, which has obviously been around longer. It is a giant company now. I mean, Opto is growing very quickly, and we want to learn from RIAs like what about this could be easier for you to use it. But we have dozens of firms that have created custom funds on it for their clients and access things that I think otherwise they never would have accessed, and made it really easy for them to do it. So I would love people's feedback on what we're doing here. This is a younger company, but growing really fast, and I'm really proud to kind of get people the best access in the alts world. I think it's such a fun, interesting world that a lot of people really don't know how to approach if they haven't been doing it in the past, or if they have been doing some, but maybe they don't have certain expertise in other areas. Sometimes for our custom funds, like they'll choose certain areas, certain managers they know, but then we'll complement it and help them do that with other areas they haven't studied as much. And so, we love people's feedback.
So you wear a lot of hats. You're chairman of Addepar. You're deeply involved in Opto. Tell us about your day job, 8VC, a venture capital firm.
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur. I like to build things. And a lot of the people from Palantir, from Addepar, have gone on to build lots of other companies. And so I've been coaching. I started coaching a lot of them. So just like with PayPal, where we had $16 billion companies come out of it after eBay bought us, Palantir's now had over 100 successful companies come out of it that people have started over the last couple decades. And so I ended up saying it makes sense to actually build an investment firm. My mentors told me I basically was doing an investment firm, didn't have enough money or enough people. So the last 12 years we put together a pretty big firm in the venture capital space. We build and launch companies. We back companies early, and I mean it's nice in venture if you don't raise big funds, they become very, very oversubscribed. So I'm not here to raise money for 8VC, but it's a fun area. And I'll tell you, since you're asking about there's really two areas that we're probably really well known for the last few years. One of them is defense. We've started multiple new defense companies, including nearby here. We actually backed early Anduril with Palmer Luckey and some of my ex-Palantir colleagues, and they're become a new defense prime, which is really cool. If you haven't checked it out online, there's amazing videos of the things they're doing. And then the other two, one of them, drone swarms have become a huge problem. It's just really hard to stop. We're spending $2 billion missiles to shoot down cheap little drones with bombs coming at our troops, and they'll swarm 100 at once. So we figured out how to use new technology to send out microwave radiation really, really far from pretty small device to shoot down swarms of drones. And we're now deployed live. It turns out the AI chips can get the power to hit the gallium nitride emitter all at once, turn them off. So we built that, and we have another company building thousands of ships for the U.S. Navy, smaller ships, because it turns out China has 200 times our shipbuilding capacity, which is frankly a huge crisis. It used to be in World War II, Germans had better ships than we did, but every time we lose a ship, you'd build 3 more because we have the best building capacity. America now, with literally 200 times the shipbuilding capacity in China, very scary for our ability to deter them. So we're figuring out how to take our best and brightest. Frankly, Elon Musk, who's a good friend, has really revitalized advanced manufacturing in America. We're taking some of that talent, putting it into military areas as well to make sure we stay ahead of the bad guys. So we're doing a lot in defense. And then the one other area I'll mention is what we call AI services. And so there's a huge part of our economy right now that we've shown we can actually double or triple the productivity using AI. And so this is stuff like healthcare billing, logistics billing, back office processes. In the alts world, it's like how do you manage and subscribe and deal with all the alts paperwork and stuff. There's just lots of these areas that are going to just be completely changed. And so we think there's multi-trillion-dollar opportunities in those areas and building a lot of companies that are succeeding in them.
I want to stay with defense a little bit because you're involved in so many really interesting areas. I first heard of Palmer Luckey with the Oculus, which you were an early investor in, before I think Facebook ended up buying that.
Yeah, Facebook bought it for over $2 billion just a few years in. He made him a billionaire at like 22 or something, which will go to your head pretty fast.
And then not too long ago, maybe it was Wired Magazine did a profile on really interesting things that Palmer is doing with drone technology and defense technology. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in that space.
Yeah, so basically Palantir and SpaceX were the first two companies to break in and effectively become some form of defense prime, the first new ones in 30 years. Because you had all these old primes, they all consolidated after the Cold War ended in the 90s, and they basically had a total lock on DC. And Palantir, it took us a long time, a lot of stubbornness to break in, and then some points we had to sue the U.S. government because they were doing crazy things, and we won. SpaceX similarly had to sue the U.S. government because they just discriminate against new things, right? And obviously SpaceX, good thing they won because they're obviously 100 times better than the alternative. Frankly, after doing Palantir, I said, this defense stuff is just really stressful. It's really hard to break into. I'm going to do Addepar instead. Turns out you guys are stressful too. But I'm like, I've done enough defense. And we started being pretty bullish on things going on between China and the U.S. and very naively thought the world was just going to go in a kind of more peaceful, more prosperous direction. And we saw this guy, Xi Jinping, come in. And I have friends with a lot of the guys who built these companies in China. A lot of them believe in free markets, read Milton Friedman, share a lot of our values. These are not, just because they're Chinese, they're not bad people. They're not CCP themselves. And we saw Xi Jinping start cracking down on these guys. A lot of them disappeared. I've had multiple friends who knew really well who died in their sleep in their 40s, after being tech billionaires. And we saw him also making a lot of our friends force their top engineers to work on defense projects. Obviously, we don't do that in the U.S., but this became very concerning because China does have really top talent, and they were forcing them to build new things in defense hardware. Meanwhile, in the U.S., those old companies that consolidated in the 90s, they were hiring basically none of our smartest friends. So this is a crisis. You have China building really new advanced defense things. You have U.S. spending lots of money very wastefully without top talent. And we said, wow, we need to get back in and fix this. So Palmer, with 3 of my old Palantir guys, after selling Oculus to Facebook, and they kicked him out of Facebook because he did some politics they didn't like. He's on the right. But so he and these guys start this new company nearby here, and it's become the most important new defense prime in hardware. They have all sorts of products. The one you should check out online is called the Roadrunner. If you've ever seen Elon's rockets that kind of go up and land themselves, he has the same thing for advanced missiles. And so these missiles come in this box, and it'll go up and it'll track and destroy the bad guys. But if you don't use it, if it doesn't explode, it'll come back and it'll land and it'll wait to be used again. And so not only is it like the 12th the cost of a Patriot missile, it also could be reused. We're actually putting, remember that Epirus company that shoots things down with microwave radiation? We're going to put that on it. So you can imagine a swarm of these going, flying, shooting that, turning things off, then coming back and landing to use it again. And modern warfare is going to be swarms of autonomous small vessels, small drones, like all these things. And we can't afford to do what we've been doing with the defense primes, which is to build things that are way too expensive, kind of last generation's technology, and you're going to run out of them against the swarms our adversaries are going to have. So we're really trying to make sure we stay ahead of them.
So I want to combine 2 things you mentioned, the new technologies, swarming, and the massive overcapacity to build ships of China versus the U.S. What have we learned from the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how the Ukrainians are defending themselves with technology? How can that be applied towards any potential invasion of Taiwan by China?
Yeah, so Palantir and Anduril, Palmer's company, are very active in Ukraine, doing a lot of important things there. We've learned it's about drone swarms. We learned it's about cost. So, for example, the U.S. makes these anti-radiation missiles that are $3 million each. We sold 300 of them to Poland, I think, a few months ago for $1 billion. And these missiles are able to find jammers and take them out. Russia's figured out how to build these jammers. And these jammers, by the way, they stop artillery from targeting. They really are dominant on the battlefield. So it's electronic warfare. They figured out how to build them like $20,000, $30,000. You can't win a war with $3 million things being used to take out $30,000 things. You're just going to run out of, no matter how rich you are, you're going to run out of money on the battlefield. So war is like an engineering thing where it's about scarcity, right? And so we've learned you have to build cheaper, smarter, distributed systems. And the electronic warfare stuff's fascinating. Listen, there's a lot of smart people who are against us going into Russia. We probably should be careful with nuclear power. So I'm not going to say this is good or not, but it's interesting. Ukraine was able to basically create these electronic warfare bubbles by figuring out how to jam sensors in different ways and kind of create a protection bubble around their forces that then did the major incursion. And it was all about electronic warfare and turning on and off these sensors, along with like how to manipulate swarms. And so the battlefield is totally changing versus how we would do these things 20 years ago. And we're trying to make sure we build companies here and technologies here in response to this and go fast on it.
So all of these giant ships that China's building, is it likely or possible that there will be a small autonomous swarm of vessels that counterbalance that?
Well, China's pretty smart, so I think they're mostly building submarines, which are difficult. But yes, so Sanic is the latest company we helped start. It's run by a former Navy SEAL of 11 years in Austin, Texas. A lot of the admirals of the fleet are very involved. And what we're doing is we're even next year in Austin, we're gonna have 600 ships we build that are 24 feet, 14 feet, and 6 feet. These are weaponized autonomous vessels. We're teaching the Navy how to use AI to have them coordinate. So what we showed them when they agree is we can basically triple the battle effectiveness of our fleet by complementing all the big ships of the line with about 30 smaller weaponized vessels that swarm and coordinate and help in different ways. It's kind of fun. It's like a little video game sort of thing. I actually have a lot of LA video game talent helping us map it out and practice battles and stuff. But no, I mean, yes, we have to do lots of small ships if we want to stay ahead of them. And unfortunately, our DoD is not as competent as it used to be, but our private companies are the best in the world. So we're going to keep getting involved, same as private companies did in World War II, and make sure we stay ahead of the bad guys.
So let's shift gears. I want to talk about OpenGov, which is another project of yours. You provide software for over 2,000 municipalities and state agencies. What was that adoption practice like? How long did that take?
Well, we sold OpenGov earlier this year for $1.8 billion to Cox. And, originally my friends and I, we were wondering why California was taxing us so much and where they were spending the money. This is about 13, 14 years ago. And so I got about 20 Stanford students in a nonprofit at first, and we tried to just like put everything online. It was great. I didn't have my name on it, so all these students kept getting attacked by the unions because they really don't like it when you show them spending lots of money in government departments. It basically showed that California had a bunch of departments that were dominated by these special interests that were spending about 50 to 60% more than this was 13 years ago, than you'd imagine by the model, right? Of course, it's corrupt. And all these cities started emailing us saying, oh, this is really cool. Show us for our spending. Are we doing something good or not? And we said, sure, send us the data. And the cities would say, well, how do we send the data over? And we looked into it, and there's tens of thousands of municipalities in the US, and they mostly don't have access to their own information. They have to pay their IT consultants huge amounts of money to do a report. They couldn't even see what they're spending versus sitting next door for similar services. And so we decided to build this thing called OpenGov, and we built a way for them to see all their data. And then we realized governments don't like paying for new things. They only can pay for the things they're already doing. So we built a bunch of software for them to run all their budgeting and their transparency and their processes and asset management. And it's just built a big gov tech company.
So I'm kind of fascinated how you've bounced across sectors. Big data, defense, government, healthcare, finance, even now education. How do you approach learning a space that you haven't been in before?
Well, for building these companies and for succeeding as an investor in venture, there's really two things that matter the most. One is the very top technology talent and technology cultures. So cultures of places like Opto, when we're iterating with you, it's because we have like these really amazing, talented people who are building really quickly and who are speaking to people and getting feedback with them. And then the other thing we're looking for is like, where is a gap in the world? Where is something, here's where it could be, and here's where it is now. So again, go back to alts and think about that. It's very clear there's a gap. The incentives are misaligned for how people are accessing alts. The platforms are wasting a lot of their time. And it's not easy for them to see what the best things are and to really quickly iterate and do their job for their clients. And so it's very obvious there's a gap there. And so what you do is you have a hypothesis. You get a really great tech culture where the people at Opto own a bunch of the company themselves, are really talented people who've had wins before, know how to build and iterate in tech. They're from Addepar, they're from other places. And then you build and you iterate with clients, because no matter how smart we think we are, we're going to come to you and show it to you. There's going to be things that are wrong. There's going to be things that are not useful for you. But because you have a great tech culture, you can iterate very quickly and learn. And so the company's now been around for a few years. It's now at the point where people are starting to really love it because they've been doing it based on feedback. So when you approach a new space, it's not about being an expert in this space. It's about having a really amazing culture that talks to the experts and learns from them and builds with them over time.
And Joe, I love this quote of yours, and I have to ask you about it. My passions are repairing broken industries and government, inculcating classical virtues,
prioritizing families and enabling a free and prosperous society
Sounds
where
like some kind of
everyone can
politician.
thrive. Right? You're running for, well, discuss the quote. I can't imagine you're ever running for office, are you?
Sounds like it'd be a horrible job, to be honest. Listen, our society is facing a lot of really broken things right now. There's a lot of stuff that's wrong. And I think classical virtues are missing in our society. I think courage is not a virtue that's taught to our elite. If you go to a top 100 university, you are taught the opposite of courage. You're taught to shut up, virtue signal, go along, don't think for yourself, don't oppose the Borg, whatever they say is right. And it's really broken. I think it's really scary what we face in our society right now. So, I think the fundamental units of the West are the classical virtues, are the liberty values around the Enlightenment, are functional families with two-parent households. I think these are all things that make our society functional, and if we don't say it and we don't fight for it, we're going to have a really broken society.
All right. We have time for a couple of questions from Slido. Let's take a look. What do you look for when evaluating fund managers for yourself and your family office?
So when I'm looking for fund managers, for me, because I have a network of these people, I want to know that a lot of my friends really respect them. I want to know they have some unfair advantages. I want to know that they have, obviously, an amazing track record. And then I want to know that there's some reason why they're still in the game and focused. I think a lot of people who've had a lot of success, there's various things happen in their lives, and they're no longer working, they no longer have the same culture. So I want to know the culture of the organization around them at their fund and know that they are still working as hard as they were when they first created that, that first success. Because that's something that slips very easily, so you got to watch out for it.
And here's a perfect question to wrap up on. What are the most exciting trends you're seeing in the marketplace today?
So the most exciting trend by far, I started to hint at it earlier, is what's going on with applying AI to services industries. There's about $5 trillion of wages in the US in the services sector. Over $2 trillion of those wages are in areas where we've already shown you can double the productivity, in some cases triple the cash flow from these old legacy businesses. This is a whole new area of tech-enabled services that actually works now. We're seeing, example, healthcare billing, $280 billion revenue industry, typical margin is 20%. We already have companies getting 50, 60% margin, fixing that space. There's huge parts of our economy where you're going to have productivity shoot upwards. If we can manage not to break our country with the stupid government stuff the next several years, we're going to have a very productive society.
That was my conversation with Joe Lonsdale. He is the co-founder of Palantir, as well as a number of other finance and technology-related startups. I thought the discussion was fascinating, and I can't wait to get him in the studio for a full 90 minutes to really do a deep dive into his career. If you enjoy this conversation, well, be sure and check out any of the 500 previously discussions we've had over the past 10 years. You can find those at iTunes, Spotify, Bloomberg, YouTube, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And be sure and check out my new short-form podcast, At the Money, 10-minute discussions with experts about topics related to your money, earning it, spending it, and most importantly, investing it. At the Money in the Masters in Business feed or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.